Moving, I want to go to Turkey for a moment. Last summer, actually, I believe we spoke about the Gezi Park protests and how a kind of underappreciated aspect of the controversies surrounding Prime Minister Erdogan in Turkey was, in fact, his strong, extreme neoliberalism in some respects. And it seems to me that as Erdogan has gotten more and more volatile as a personality and as a leader, and this mining disaster that it's bringing some things into very some making some things quite clear, it seems to me. And I would love to your perspective on what was the particular role of the neoliberalism privatization aspects of this mining disaster, and is there a possibility that the response to this from the prime minister, as well as the context surrounding it, could lead to maybe a broader disillusionment with his governance than previous things we have seen?
Yeah, well, there's not a really good sign in the polling that Erdogan has suffered among his power base, and that's what's important since it seems to be a majority of the country. Tayyip Erdogan is has Muslim fundamentalist tendencies, although he, was in jail for them because Turkey mandated secularism and the generals used to persecute Muslim activists. And so he adopted this rhetoric of kind of pluralism or multiculturalism, in which he tried to make a place in secular Turkey for observant Muslims. Women with headscarves weren't allowed on government property and university campuses, and his whole program from one side was about a kind of multiculturalism. And on the other, again, he emphasized against the old state run by the generals and the secular elite. He emphasized privatization of the public sector, which was quite large in Turkey, and had, again, in the past 10 years, an enormous success with those policies. His government vastly increased trade. They increased foreign investment. Indisputably, people in the small towns of Turkey are better off than they had been because of this increase in economic efflorescence. And however, the generals had destroyed the unions, and so the working class organization is very weak, and there's a lot of corruption. Some people think that there's a bubble-like aspect to some of this efflorescence. And this mine in Soma appears to have been, privatized as part of the privatization program, and then not properly inspected. When Erdogan went there, and there had been this fire, and people died, hundreds died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Probably, it was implicated in neoliberal policies that less regulation, more privatization, etc. And so Erdogan was, as the cheerleader for those policies, was on the defensive, and he went there. And he said, well, yes, this is a horrible tragedy, but, these things happened in Victorian England when it was taking off in the 19th century. And,
Right.
He actually instanced several, mining disasters in Victorian England. And I think people didn't understand why, but from my point of view, it's very clear. Victorian England was that transition in the 19th century of Britain from being an agrarian to an industrial society. And the British economy just multiplied many times over in that period, and became Britain became a new kind of economic colossus in the world because of this. So in Erdogan's mind, he's Palmerston or something.
Mm-hmm.
He's at the helm of this magnificent transformation of Turkey into a world power and a capitalist giant. So he was kind of saying, well, there are costs to that, and this is one of them. And the people whose loved ones had died in the mines were furious at him. They attacked him. He had to run away to a grocery store, and there was a crowd in there, and he had to slap some guy to get away from him, and he may have slapped two people. And
I think he slapped two people.
Yeah, and I think one of them was a woman. Well, it's a fog of war. You can't really tell. But then there was one of his
fog
aides
of Erdogan.
got caught on. Erdogan. So one of Erdogan's aides got caught on camera kicking a protester and a mourner. So the message from Erdogan was, to the workers' families was, suck it up. This is the price of progress. And
you're expendable in that process. I'm sorry, go ahead. But I mean, I think it was even more brutal than that. Really, it's you're a statistic for this broader project, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's exactly right. People were outraged, and there have been protests. There had been protests against Erdogan's policies last summer by kind of engaged youth because. Erdogan never saw a mall he didn't like, and his government has been kind of putting them everywhere. What are these useless trees doing here when there could be a mall? And so it's consumerism and privatization, deregulation, and Islam. All those things go together in Erdogan's mind. So your juxtaposition of India and Turkey in this program is quite canny because I think some similar keynotes are being hit here.
Absolutely. No, I mean, that, right. These are these formulas we're seeing kind of emerge in these contexts, and they've been around for a while, but obviously we're quite familiar with it in the United States, the fusion of a strong religiosity and cultural politics with a devotion to kind of unencumbered market policies. But I guess the final question on Erdogan, though, is that it seems to me that in some respects the process with him has been... when he first came to power, there was certainly the notion that because again, we, always, every time there's a discussion of Turkey, it's very important, I think, to note that in the first couple of years of this government, they made more progress in terms of Turkey getting closer to joining the EU than previous secular Turkish governments. They really did impose some genuine reforms in human rights and other areas in Turkey that were significant, not to mention actually some real success in terms of the Kurdish question, which is always significant in Turkey. But it just seems to me that, there's a language in some of the literature of discoursing democracy versus internalizing democracy. And it seems that with Erdogan that, democracy is the thing that's going to go. Religiosity and markets are there to stay, but democracy seems expendable, or at least anything beyond elections. I mean, is that fair? Or, yeah.
Well, I think, the conception of democracy, because Erdogan keeps winning these elections with a large margin, and it's gotten to the point now where he thinks democracy is winning an election,
right.
Which some political scientists would call elective dictatorship. Right. That once the people have gone to the ballot box and elected a government, then they should sit down and be quiet, and the government should do whatever it likes. I mean, we saw a lot of that in the Bush-Cheney years here, and so he believes in a kind of elective dictatorship. And he's displayed this belief more and more fervently as time has gone on, and as he has faced challenges even from the religious right. So the religious right in Turkey is split in two groups, and they're the Erdogan people, and then there's a kind of corporate almost group, the Gülencis, followers of Gülen, who lives in Pennsylvania, and who are kind of Muslim modernists and joined with Erdogan initially, but they've developed a feud with him, and since they were inside his government, they had access to a lot of secrets about corruption that they've been revealing in the past few months, and Erdogan has become, therefore, more and more defensive, being attacked both from the secular center and left and from the religious right. But again, he like Modi to some extent, despite an increasing rhetoric of intolerance, he has been at the helm over 10 years of genuine economic expansion that has actually improved people's standard of living in the small towns and cities of the center, and is therefore enormously popular.
It's the economy, stupid.
Yeah.
Professor Professor Cole, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate having you on.
It's so great being here. Thanks so much.
Take good care. Bye-bye.